Whew. What would happen if a GoPro and a gimbal had a baby? Well, they'd probably make something that looked like the Removu K1. What's up everyone, I'm the Everyday Dad. If I can figure it out, you can figure it out. As we mentioned an awful lot, I really like action cameras, and I also really like gimbals. And when the two get married up and turned into one device, I get really excited to see what it can do. Now, before we get started, I do want to thank Removu for sending this to me to check out. They aren't paying me for the video, but they did send me this camera to see what I think about it, and just keep that in mind as we go along. Now that we've got that out of the way, we've got to get this out of, well, it's already out of the box, but let's get it out of the box again. Next up, let's cover the basic specs of the Removu K1. It has a 1/2.3 inch CMOS sensor. Its camera is 12 megapixels. It has a 17mm field of view at f2.8. It can do 4K at 30 frames per second, 1080p at 30, 60, and 120 frames per second, and it can do 720p up to 240 frames per second. It comes with a 2900 milliamp hour removable battery. On the front of the gimbal, you'll find a 1.5 inch LCD screen that will show you live what the camera is filming. Now, first impressions, this screen is pretty rough. It's not the best quality, and it does have a fairly aggressive blue tint. It'll work for the framing, but not much else. Also on the front is the joystick, record button, take a photo button, and the menu button. On the right side is something very nice that I really appreciate, is a microphone in 3.5mm jack and a slot for a micro SD card. Now, one thing that Removu did want me to specifically mention is this requires at least a U3 SD card to function properly. Basically, you need an SD card that can record 4K. On the front is a trigger that lets you change a few of the functions of the gimbal. 1 click switches between follow mode and pan mode. 2 clicks resets the camera to center, and 3 clicks turns it into selfie mode. And finally, on the left side is the on-off switch. And when it comes to mounting options, on the bottom, you'll find a standard 1/4 inch tripod mount, which means your tripod is directly mounted to your battery. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not. We'll talk more about that in the future. When it comes to physically holding it, the K1 feels pretty darn good. I'd have to say it has an equivalent feel of the original DJI Osmo Mobile 1. It does feel really good and very high quality. All the buttons are nicely clicky, and the joystick has some nice movement to it. But since the Removu K1 is part action camera, it needs to have judgment passed on it, and that judgment comes in the form of the pillars of action. First pillar, ease of use. For newcomers to the channel, if you are new by the way, you should totally subscribe and click that bell notification icon. I hold ease of use above almost everything else when it comes to action cameras, and a lot of other gear actually. The more complicated a camera or tool is, the less likely I'm gonna use it when it comes to making family videos or making my YouTube videos. Now, thankfully, this thing is pretty darn easy to use. There is no balancing or messing with separate pieces. You simply turn it on, and it's ready to go. There's no balancing, it just works. It's so good. Once it's going, all the controls are right within the use of one hand while you're filming, and though the screen again is not great, it does make it easier to know if what you want to film is in frame in your shot. The screen isn't a touchscreen, and it is kind of hard to see in bright daylight, but like I said, it's nice to know what's in frame. Another ding, the menu system isn't the greatest, but like I've mentioned on other action cameras, if you set everything prior to filming, it's easy to use the system to get your shot. Pillar number 2, durability. If you are going to pay top dollar for a camera, especially an action camera, you gotta make sure it won't break the first time you go out using it. And that's why I keep durability so high on the list. The more moving parts a device has is more opportunity for it to break. There's no defeating that. Having 3 axis of stabilization does mean there are more breakable pieces and there are more points of failure on the K1. Also, with these open ports, that means it's not going to be waterproof. maybe water resistant, but it's definitely not waterproof. Like I mentioned earlier, it feels great, and I do think the build quality is pretty good, and I think it's durable enough as far as gimbals go, but not as much on the action camera side. My main durability concern in the last week of using the Removu is if you mount it on anything moving, everything hinges, pun intended, on these two plastic brackets holding it in. Now that's fine if you have it mounted on a tripod or you're just hand holding it, but if you attach this to a mountain bike or a motorcycle or a car or anything moving, I'd be really concerned. Pillar number 3, compatibility with GoPro style mounts and accessories. Again, nothing thus far has come out to replace GoPro and their copycats in the mounting and accessory department as far as action camera goes. This is not a solo action cam, which makes judging it against them is kinda tricky. It's a self-contained unit that doesn't need an external gimbal, and you can use an adapter to mount it to GoPro mounts, so I'd say it does as well as it can as far as compatibility goes. Pillar number 4, decent, not perfect image quality. When it comes to tiny sensored action cameras, you get roughly the same image quality from each of them, and I think the K1 does a perfectly good job. There is some noise in the image, mainly in low light, but again, you'd get that with almost any equivalent action camera. The picture quality is perfectly fine for my purposes, and being able to frame shots as you go leads to fewer wasted clips. Now, in all fairness, I do miss shots from time to time on my FDR X3000 because you can't see what you're filming. Now I will say there is one thing that I'm still kind of hesitant about in the image quality department, and that there is this weird anti-fisheye distortion thing going on with my face. Now I noticed it on the screen originally where it looks really pronounced, and even in the recorded footage, your face gets pinched in a bit. Now this isn't just a Removu problem. When using wider lenses or wider action camera shots, the same thing happens. It's the fisheye distortion, and what's weird here is that it happens without also having a super wide angle of view. It's not a deal breaker for me, it's just an oddity of the camera. And this is a vlogging / audio test of the Removu K1. Audio test 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I do really like that it's a handheld gimbaled camera. You can see the screen, so I can see what the framing is, so I can see that, you know, I'm still in frame, which is cool. I like that. It also has a microphone jack on the side, so we can attach a real microphone to it. And last but certainly not least, pillar number 5, stabilization. Now this should be an easy win for the K1 as it's a camera gimbal hybrid that carries its gimbal around with it like a turtle carries around its home. Yeah, the stabilization is great, both in handheld shots, walking shots, and running shots. The gimbal on this thing is just awesome, and one of the benefits of having an all-in-one system is, unlike cell phone gimbals, you don't have to worry about the camera stabilization and the gimbal stabilization fighting each other. When it's designed to be all one unit, it works really well, and I'm seriously impressed. So what, right? So what are my thoughts about the Removu K1, and should you get one? First up, I really like this setup. I've never used a DJI Osmo camera system besides the mobile device, but I like how easy it is to get the K1 going. You don't have to balance anything, it's simply turn it on, hit record, and you've got really good stable footage. Though I do have 3 gripes about the product that might be a deal breaker depending on how you use your action cameras. Number 1, it's not waterproof, maybe it's water resistant, and like I said, I like that they added a 3.5mm audio jack, but there's no cover for it. So water will definitely get in there, and it's gonna be hard using this for rugged stuff unless you really baby it. Number 2, the face warping effect. And I don't really understand why it's happening. Like I said, normally that happens with fisheye distortion where like the sides of the picture are bowed out. It also has the effect of like scrunching in faces. But the sides are not bowed out here. It only does it on the face, so it's kind of weird, but it's still kind of a gripe. And number 3, and what could be the worst one, is the tripod mount is also the battery compartment, and it's held together by 2 little plastic brackets. Again, this is perfectly fine if you're just hand holding it, but if you're gonna attach to something, you're putting an awful lot of faith in 2 little pieces of plastic. But what really matters, should you get a Removu K1? Now this really boils down to, do you want an all-in-one system, or do you want 2 separate things that can do their own thing, but also work together? At current prices, you could get a GoPro Hero 2018 with the gimbal for about the same price as the K1. However, if you want an all-in-one solution with a selfie screen and an included 3.5mm audio jack, the Removu is actually a pretty good little camera. If you want something for serious rugged adventures, but still want something easy to use, you can still use the K1. Just remember, you're gonna have to watch out for the ports and the battery cover. It's gonna need a little more babying than a standard action camera. We'll do another video next week covering the accessory kit and comparing it to a GoPro gimbal combination. And if there's something you wanna see out of that video, leave a comment below and we'll get to it. Thanks for watching.